Coral Osborne, welcome to the UNcivilized podcast. I have
Thank you
wanted
for
to have
having
you
me.
on ever since I read a Substack piece of yours. And so I want to out myself as loving the shit out of your piece titled, I Hired a Sex Worker, right? Or is it a male sex worker?
I hired a male escort, so a little bit
I
more
hired a
provocative
male
even.
escort.
I just,
Yeah, I hired a male
full
escort.
send on the title.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. And was like, okie dokie, well done on the hook. You got me. And I have questions for you. Uh,
I have
But
answers,
before
I
we
hope.
dive into that piece, before we dive into your writing, as I just said, you're a beautiful writer. I would love to hear or have you share with the audience who you are now. I know we'll get into some parts of who you may have been in the past, but how are you inhabiting the earth right now?
Oh, that's very meta. I guess I have to approach
Mhm.
those. um, I'm like, where do I go with this? I am a million different things. I could spend the
Yeah.
entire episode listing what those parts are. I hate identity. Um,
Okay.
I would say I come back to the Alan Watts quote of I'm under no obligation to be who I was 5 minutes ago. So right
Mm.
now I'm, um, you know, a woman ready to explore the depths of my vulnerability and sexuality in this conversation with you as a
Beautiful.
writer.
Beautiful.
I work with men as a
Mm.
coach around intimacy, but I like to say it's more identity.
Mm.
um, because that's rooted in my experience, which we'll, I'm sure, circle back to,
Mhm.
having found this work through um, having been a sex worker, a closeted sex worker for many years,
Mm.
whilst also pursuing many other things and, getting into that line of work to fund my tech startup at the time. And
Amazing.
then, realizing that we're all expected to reduce each other down to categories, to identities. And
Mm.
it's not this binary thing, right? And since coming out and sharing my experiences, which I still do, both past and more recent, like what we're going to talk about, you'd think that that would make me totally vilified, ostracized, unlovable, because I share a lot of the messy parts. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, and I figured it all out and now I go to church every Sunday.
Mm.
And I've got 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. No.
Mhm.
But I will say it took me 35 years and 37 now to fully know and love who I
Mm.
am and know that that's never done. I'm never done. I've never done the work. I love the work.
Mhm.
I don't even like
Mm.
calling it work. Um, so yeah, I'm Coral. I'm the Madonna. I'm the whore. I'm the little girl. I'm the mother. I'm the whatever. I'm a chef. I was a tech startup owner. I was the the lead singer of a band. I do lots of weird shit, and here I am.
Mhm. Brilliant answer. Thank you. And you're a writer. Tell me
Mhm.
about that piece that you wrote. What was the inspiration first to write it and therefore to hire the escort, or was the inspiration, hey, this is my life and now I'm going to share this piece with the world?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question because sometimes I have to ask myself that question. And when I launched my Substack last year, um, and just, it's every piece I write is taking an erotic experience of my own and then dissecting it from a sexological lens. I got a literary agent pretty quickly, and lots of ideas started floating around, and it was like, oh, am I supposed to go collect more experiences and
Mm.
like just have a bunch of sex, of like novel
Mhm.
sex, so I can write about it? And that didn't feel right for me, right? It didn't feel right at all
Mhm.
because ultimately what I crave is connection. Is really at this point in my life, if
Mhm.
I'm being completely honest, a relationship with one man, a monogamous relationship, right? Um, so I'm constantly confronted with, okay, I am committed to telling the truth of where I'm at, no matter what, no matter
Mhm.
how that makes me look. The truth was, I was ovulating and I hadn't, I had been on a few terrible recent dates, just not terrible, just like not good conventional dating has not served me, the apps or, things like that, or being out on the scene. And I was attempting to be celibate before that. I, went into the new year like, oh, I'm going to try being celibate because I haven't done that. And then I was like, well, that's dumb because that's like, that, I've done a lot of self work. So I'm like, okay, well, how else can I connect? Is there a way to get my needs met? And, I've also been working so much where I can explore this. So then on a whim, literally one morning, I was like talking to my girlfriend and I was like, I'm just going to do this. And then I started thinking real time, like ascribing this narrative to what I'm like, I'm going to the ATM machine. And I was like writing it in my head as I was going through every motion. And then so right after it happened, it pretty much obviously wrote itself pretty quickly. So no, but what's really important for me is that I don't write things to be provocative just for the sake of being provocative, which a lot of what I write is provocative by nature. Sure. But I don't do it for response. I do it because it's honest. And, if you read what I write, it's like, doesn't make me look like the best all the time or like I know I have the answers. It's like uncomfortable. And when it's uncomfortable, I know I have to share it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. That piece for me hit two areas, which I shared before we hit record, that I find fascinating, which are just sex and power dynamics. And the power dynamic, you shifted it from your normal role or your past normal role or the role that you were probably more comfortable in. I would love to hear from your perspective for people who haven't read the article. And for those of you who haven't, I'll link it in the show notes. Talk me through some of this as someone who's used to being on the other side of that dynamic.
Yeah. So going into it, for years, for my entire life, I had performative sex because it wasn't just performative sex. It was why? Because I had no self-worth. Like, I wanted to be chosen, right? So that predated sex work. People like to say, oh, trauma, sex work. I'm like, no, I wouldn't even say that sex work was traumatic at all. In fact, it led me exactly to where I am now. My trauma was the lowercase t trauma of, my mom had been sexually abused after her father took his life. She moved in with an uncle at 11. And so I grew up always knowing that my mom had been abused. And like just emotionally, we were very attached to one another. And she was a social worker. She became a social worker and worked with a lot of street level sex workers, right? So that was her view of sex work. Also, sex was meant for love. That's it. And I remember her telling me the way a man has sex with you is like the way he loves you, right? So there was no room for nuance or kink or anything out of the ordinary there. And of course, as a younger girl, and I developed crushes and have feelings, and I would feel so awful for those feelings and so much shame. And then my dad is very much, he's an artist. He's a rock musician. He's like very laissez-faire, not masculine. I say this to his face, so I'm allowed to say this. We're more like brother and sister. My mom are still together. They're great. But they're so different. So I got a very conflicting message around sexuality. And I remember my dad saying to me, like, he was just like never worried about me. He was never worried about me. My mom was always worried about me. So I went from being a very timid, reserved little girl afraid of her own shadow to then I could no longer hold that. When I was 13, I split into becoming very promiscuous, very loud, obnoxious. And the core belief there was, well, boys can't take anything from me if I give it to them. So if I become like one of the boys, like their friend, pick me girl, and just give them sex and give whatever, then they can't take anything from me. That was the overcorrection. And of course, the natural evolution of that was years later getting a sex work. I had no idea why I was the way I was at the time for many, many years, right? I was, for some reason, compelled to sex work. Didn't know why. And got into it out of necessity. I'd come to LA and I was starting a tech company, legally working here, ran out of runway. I was like, well, what are my options? I've always been curious about this. If I'm okay with it, it solves all my problems. Realizing then, like, holy shit, this is so not at all what I thought it would be. everyone was, the men I met in those spaces were showing up completely who they were as is, because there's something about not having to negotiate sex, that there was like a persona element that was taken out. Right. And so I just got to see everyone with the mask off, but I became very good at making everyone else feel seen. Right. And that felt important to me, like cultivating an experience where a man could actually be perceived in a way that he wasn't normally able to be, and express all of himself and not be judged. And a lot of that wasn't actually kinky, crazy stuff. It was pretty vanilla, but it was just more so emotional. So it's kind of reverse engineering it. But of course, having been performative as a teen, going into that, it became even more performative in terms of also being in control. It was not about cultivating authentic intimacy for me. It was a way to bypass it, to control it, right? To avoid really connecting with it. But it also was intimate in that container. So it was very weird.
Yeah.
And then I felt bad. I felt shame over the fact that I didn't feel shame around it. Like, cause I couldn't explain why I felt more seen and more heard and more valued in sex work than I did dating and out in the real world. So I could never explain that. So I felt so much shame, and I just lived with that secret. And every
Can we put a quick time out in there and ask, will you say a little bit more about that, about the bifurcation between how you felt more seen and acknowledged or met as a sex worker than you did dating? Would you mind just sharing a little bit more about that? Hey, this is Traver. I hope you're loving this episode of the Uncivilized podcast. I certainly did. One of the things I want to let you guys know is that I run this extraordinary group called the Uncivilized Nation. And over the past 5 years, I have seen thousands of men come and transform their lives. So if you are a man interested in going from numb to fully alive, from lost to on purpose, from domesticated to dangerous in the best possible way, please check us out at www.manuncivilized.com/the nation. Again, manuncivilized.com/the nation. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. I remember before, like a year before I got into sex work, I was in a longer term relationship, and my boyfriend had known that I dated an actor, like a pretty well-known actor, and he hated it. He was extremely jealous of it, even though I had ended that relationship to date my then broke boyfriend. And he locked me in a room one night, and wouldn't let me out until I said I was a sugar baby. That's what he wanted me to admit, that I would date this actor for his money. And I wouldn't admit it because that wasn't true. And he was calling me, whore and all these names. And, I just couldn't believe this is the person that I thought saw me the most, and I saw the most. And this is like this is how he perceived me after almost 3 years. That didn't make any sense to me.
Oh, wow.
And then I go dating, and it's like, one of us would be there for connection. The other one was there for sex. And it's like, we're all kind of lying. I felt like we're all kind of lying to each other, right? Including me. I was doing things because I wanted to be chosen. I wasn't being my true self. I didn't know what that was, but I just knew it didn't feel real. Didn't feel real to me, because it always felt like there was an expectation of how to be from men. And then, men would say things too because they had expectations. So, I say that my trauma didn't come from sex work at all. It came from my experience in the dating world, and also just pre-Me Too stuff, right? Like drugs, alcohol, non-consensual stuff. Like I was part of that, like most women were. And in the container of sex work, there were clear boundaries. Desires were discussed. And since sex was already there on the table, anything beyond that, which was most of it, because let's face it, like in those environments, you're not exploring tantra. Sex is short-lived, and you're spending at least an hour, sometimes a few days with someone. Anything beyond that was real, because what else are you going to do with that time? Like you're already hiding. Both of you are already in hiding. Man more often than not, whether he was married or in a relationship, or it was just like again, the shame piece of, oh, people don't know who I actually am. It's too hard out there. I don't have time to date, or I can't actually find women that want to be with me. And then, for me, it was like, well, I'm already this. I'm already the thing that people would discard the easiest. So anything that was created beyond that was just radically real. And it was really tough to gear shift then to go from that to then going on a date. And I never was in a relationship when I did sex work at the same time, but there was one relationship where it was like, as soon as we got together, I didn't have a backup plan. Right. And I got into that relationship really quick, didn't have savings. And, so like I said, it was constantly living in fear and had cultivated no actual relational intimacy skills. It was more like, oh, here I'm the guide. I can evoke this, and this is real, and this is like a friendship, but it's not. It's very different than an actual romantic relationship, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And so, swing us back in to when you made the decision. So you made the decision to hire the escort.
Yeah. So,
and this was a male escort for people listening.
Male escort. Yeah. I'm very straight, despite my years of performative threesomes, etc. Yeah, it was. I wanted to see what would happen if a man knew nothing about me. If he, on apps out in the real world, you meet your friends. It's like the internet. They can Google me and you can see that I did sex work. I'm a sexologist, and all these preconceived ideas of who or what I am. We can do that all with each other, but with me, it's amplified for obvious reasons. Sure. And then I've always felt this, like, what would happen is they'd still kind of contort to whatever they were projecting to. I think a lot of us still struggle with that, right? Especially if we're good at it, especially if we're really good at being that outsider, the seductress, the whatever the, archetype is that we've been ascribed. So my big thing was like, how can I just receive if I'm just neutral? And I historically had never been able to receive. And of course, like, I literally did sex work because I didn't think a man would ever just want to provide or give to me, right? It was like the only way that I could accept from a man is by giving him my body and then being paid for it. And that was an exchange. And then of course that correlated with pleasure, right? This is why I'm so fascinated with sexology. How you do one thing is how you do everything. Like, I still am uncomfortable with oral sex. Doesn't do anything for me. I don't know how much of that still is anatomical versus like discomfort around receiving. And then pleasure. It was like, oh, I gate kept my pleasure, my orgasms, because that would be surrendering. That would require too much release. I can't do that. I couldn't do that. And I can have extremely potent, energetic orgasms on my own without even touching myself at times, and know exactly what to do with myself and have with other women, like I said, because I'm really straight, so there's no mating calculus running. So the objective there was like, I want to know what happens if I just don't perform, and if this person knows nothing about me, and if I'm not just trying to seduce and create something for him, right? And it ended up being like, I wrote about, the subtitle of the essay was "Sex Work is Shadow Work," because so much came up for me.
Please share more of what came up for you. I think sex is shadow work. Period. Sex is where we hide. Like our deepest secrets, our deepest desires, our deepest insecurities lie in the sexual shadow. I believe.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, so much of my identity has been bound to sexual validation. And even now, as a sexologist and as someone that works with men around their issues or desires and sex, it still is validating, right? I can't pretend that it's not. And so when the gentleman, arrived, my big thing was like, okay, well, I was so used to curating that experience and asking questions, right? As the sex worker. And I was still like, when he arrived, like, I was squeamish. I was like trying to fill the space, like, and I wanted to ask him questions and make him feel special still. And I'm like, what about me? Like, why can't I just let him discover things and do that about me? And then the first startling thing, was that he was not hard out of the gates. And I literally work with men constantly on erectile disappointment, right? And I know how that shows up and why it shows up and how attached to emotionality it is. But because, again, so much of my life was over indexed in being sexually validated. And I'm thinking, oh, I know that this man, as I spoke to him, works with, or, sees a lot of like older women. They don't look like me and blah, 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 blah. And like, it's his lucky day kind of thing. And I made this like solely about me. And what that did to putting me completely in my head, and then me reverting completely like back to being in my head and not in my body. And from then on forward, for the rest of our time together, it was like this constant push and pull. Like, can I trust him to guide his own experience? How much can I communicate? Also, I promised myself I wasn't going to obviously fake anything, especially for it. So it's like, and I told him I struggled with, do I want to tell him that I used to be a provider as well? Or is that going to change the dynamic? And I did tell him before. So I do wonder how much of that changed it, like he was like, oh, so you're a lot more experienced here than I am. And, I realized I knew what to do to get him out of his head. So, his body would come back online. And it was like this pivotal moment where it was like, what are my options here? Do I just say, don't worry about it? Okay. That's also like, then I guess admitting kind of defeat or also not leaving space for like something real to form. Or do I see what extreme I can take this to, to get him aroused, where then I'm in service again. And before he came over, I was torn between, am I going to show up completely neutral, without telling him anything about me or about what I desire, or what I'm into? Or should I totally reverse engineer this and send him, my BDSM quiz results, my Substack, my yes, no, maybe list, like everything. So he has the complete blueprint to be able to work with this experience. Right. And what I took away was like, I am so freaking complex, and he wasn't able to attune to me like I guess was able to attune to men. And what that taught me as well, more than anything, is like, oh, you can't really fake attunement. You can't really fake, like within certain limitations, especially when it comes to women. So much about sex like is meaning, right? And it's like men. There's this assumption that men are just like, well, novelty is meaning, though. Like, it's like not the act itself. It's not even the variety of partners. Like, you can simplify it by saying that, but even taking something like anal sex, like objectively speaking, vagina feels a lot better. Okay. But it's what anal sex represents in terms of, wow, this is a woman's fully giving this part of herself to me. Like it's very vulnerable, and she doesn't do this with everyone else, and she's really letting me in here. And, it's like, that is novel meaning. Now you can take that to a whole, further extent in terms of like kink and BDSM too. I come back to this quote that Athos Khan wrote. He wrote this book called Love is a Kink. He's a friend of mine. And he says that when we're kids, we play. And, we think back as adults and we're like, oh, play is like, tee-hee-hee, we're telling jokes and we're tickling each other. No, it wasn't. It was, I'm the pink Power Ranger and you're the blue Power Ranger. Or you're Lord Voldemort and I'm, the fairy princess. Or I'm like the Wicked Witch and you're Harry Potter. And we took these roles very seriously. And these were ways for us to enact our shadow in a safe environments, right? And as we get older, that doesn't exist anymore, right? So then we suppress mostly men, right? Especially men. And then it can manifest, those parts of ourselves manifest in really unhealthy ways. And one of the healthy ways we can actually express those parts is through sex, is through, exploring kink and BDSM, which isn't the idea of like whips and chains and, like lingerie and whatever. Like, sure, that can be, but it's so psychologically rooted. It's about co-created meaning.
Have you read the book, The Deep Psychology of BDSM and Kink?
No, I've heard of it, but I have not read it yet.
It's Thomas. God, I interviewed him. I'll send you the interview. He breaks down in the book even the languaging around play and a scene and how archetypal the roles are that people pick up and express in kink. It's a whole conversation that a lot of people miss completely because they can't get past the idea of trauma, abuse, whips, and chains. But I completely agree with you on all that there is to explore in there. Coral, can I swing you back? And I would love to speak now perhaps to the audience listening, both men and women. One of the biggest challenges I hear from people on both sides around sexuality is I shot up into my head. I got caught up in my head. And can you perhaps walk us through how you, in that scenario, or how you've helped others, perhaps not yourself, drop back down into the body? Because sex doesn't happen in our heads.
Yeah.
God bless. Let's speak to people listening to this who are like, that's my thing. I just can't keep out of my head when I'm engaging in this.
Yeah, absolutely. That obviously starts way outside of the bedroom with, first and foremost, self-honesty. If you're lying to yourself about shit, and that doesn't mean sexually, right? That can show up sexually. But if you're lying to yourself, if you're in denial about big aspects of your life, then that's definitely showing up in all aspects of your relational and sexual life. So, what I do with my clients and what I do in my dating life now is I lead with radical honesty. And that doesn't mean like not everyone's deserving of your truth. But before, I sleep with someone, for example, sex worker aside, I like to talk about and explore things like the erotic blueprint or fantasies. We know that the research shows that even just disclosing fantasies creates a lot more relational satisfaction, right? Because it's representative of like someone taking your bid for connection and also being willing to see the world and create meaning through your eyes. So again, it's not just sex. We reduce it by calling it just sex.
Sure.
So to not go in your head, it starts with like what are those incremental truths you can share with someone, or starting with yourself and then with someone prior to, to being in a sexual relationship or being in a sexual dynamic. I mean, it depends if you're also been in a relationship for a long time. It is more difficult to reverse engineer because if someone has seen you just in a one-dimensional way in the bedroom for a long time, it's going to be probably scary and shocking, which is why it's also really important that I love to educate people, not just my clients. I love talking about this stuff to anyone and everyone, to explain kink psychology, to explain the meaning behind our kinks, fetishes, sexual proclivities, desires, and the distinction between the fantasy and the desire, which is the impulse to actually act it out. So the truth telling and also the boundary setting, right? Like literally where you're afraid to ask for what you want in sex, you're afraid to ask for the raise, you're afraid to ask if you can, go away on the weekend on a boys trip or whatever. So where is that showing up? What is that telling you? And the sooner you can share those truths, the sooner you can make it a fun exploration too, especially in a new relationship, then you're going to be able to implement that a lot easier and stay present in the moment. Like, I really think it's important to cover all three pinnacles in sex, like sex for connection, sex for pleasure, and sex for exploration, which is, where kink and BDSM comes in. And that's exploring your depths and your shadow and various sides of you and transgressive healing even. And then connection, it's like, that's not goal oriented. That's when we're making love. And it's like, we're not looking at the clock. It's not this duty sex. And then pleasure is like, okay, yeah, I've had a long day at fucking work and I just like want to orgasm, right? And I think you need all three of those to have a healthy sex life and a healthy relationship.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Let's tease out a little bit, if you
Mm,
would, and this is, I think, is an important one. The difference between fantasy and desire. I recently had
yeah.
someone very close to me share a fantasy, and she's like, and there's no way on earth I actually want that. But I think about it, and I there's no way I would do it. I wouldn't want it, but yet it's captivating me. So would you mind just teasing out a little bit of the difference for the audience? I see you're lighting up, so please dive
This is my
in.
favorite. This is my
your,
favorite. I know.
your poker
Like
face
my
just
dream
failed
is
you.
to go around to high school kids and talk about this. That probably won't be allowed anytime soon. But because so much, what happens is, so fantasy can live in the mind, right? Fantasy can live in the mind. It can stay there. It can arouse us, right? And we have something called non-concordant arousal too. So we can read about something vile, like even a non-consensual situation, a rape in the news, and our genitals can be responding in a way that morally and soulfully we know we would never act on. We're repulsed by, but we're responding in a different way. Okay. So fantasy again just stays up here. It's what arouses us, what turns us on, what activates our arousal. Desire is the impulse to act it out, to live out that fantasy. What we see happen is people think that they're bad for their thoughts. And because no one talks about making the distinction between fantasy and desire, what happens is this is where all the non-consensual acts take place. And we see, especially with like a lot of young men, throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like woman could think that they're just sexting about exploring a gangbang, and then he's taking that literally, right? Or it's like what I see happen a lot is women are really into CNC, consensual non-consent, right? That we like, obviously 50 Shades of Grey, we know all of this. And men are really into there's a reason why men hired sex workers, right? But for some reason we feel like we need to split all of these things up. Like, oh, if you have to marry a good woman, you cannot treat her like the whore. Or if I want to be dominated and spat on and like slapped around, whatever, like then I would historically go for the guy that was actually an asshole that actually wanted to do that for me, not realizing that again that we can create these contained play spaces, right? So you get a lot of this moralization because no one understands where our fantasies come from, and this is my favorite tool to play with. So I have this gangbang fantasy that has only developed over the past couple of years. Before I got into sexology, I was like, that's disgusting. I would never, like, a man could never love you and want to do that, and blah, 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 blah. And then since coming out with my experience as a sex worker, this fantasy really like started to take shape. And I'm like, why am I hooked on this? And like, well, let's dissect that. I was a closeted sex worker for many years. It was always about me servicing men, performing for men, right? So the overcorrection to that would be me not having to think about anything, being completely overruled and overrun and in a state of overwhelm where and part of my fantasy was, I don't even want to know who's inside. Like, I don't even want to know. I want one man curating it, and where we're making eye contact, where, he's kissing me and he's like directing the whole thing, right? That's outsourcing, because again, that's something that I never had to do. I was the one that was maintaining control and curating for everyone else. And also, if we wind back further, like I had, a very passive father who, I'd disappear for a couple of days when I was 13, 14, and he'd make a joke and say like, who was the guy? So I never had masculine containment. So it's a way of like, me completely acting out. I was also a fearful avoidant, right? I deeply craved intimacy, but simultaneously was terrified of it. So it's a way, that's where the brat archetype develops, right? So it's like, how can I provoke and okay, if you still want me after this gangbang, then like you must really, really love me because I'm doing all the things to possibly make every other man hate me, shame me, want to run away. And if you stay, so that's how big this fantasy got and what it represented to me, right? People like to reduce it down to just the act, but it tells us so much about ourselves. And then I wrote about this as well on my Substack, because I was like, well, is this something that I actually want to do? Is this, or is this something that is, okay to live in the brain here? And I broke it down. And then I got to like, okay, well, to get to have this actually be the fantasy that the way I want it is highly unlikely, right? Like I have to like, first of all, have a man that I deeply love and trust that is open to this, but then, and then find a hockey team for hockey players that also like all don't smell terrible and,
Right,
are
right.
not gonna like, and their dicks are gonna work and all this. And like, they're gonna be respectful and they're also gonna praise me in the right way and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm,
Likelihood of that happening in the way that I wanted to choreograph it, probably not. So it's like, but I really do like taking the fantasy, working with fantasy
mhm,
analysis,
mhm.
explaining to someone where it's coming from, what it means about their attachment, their shadow, their childhood wounding, their capacity, their tolerance for intimacy, for connection, their communication, right? And then we can explore, well, is this something that you actually want to act out? And what does that mean to you? Sometimes, like I said earlier, just sharing the fantasy is just as potent, right? I had a
Mhm.
partner who I'd shared that who'd read that Substack piece, and he like whispered in my ear, like he was walking me through exactly what it was that I wanted, and I felt honestly just so seen and connected to him because I didn't feel
Mhm.
like I scared him away, like he was judging
Sure.
me for that. So I
Yeah.
really encourage, we need to expand our erotic literacy to really
Mhm.
understand these things because in so many, relationships, it's like they don't understand what the underlying desire is of that fantasy. Or it's like
Yeah.
you say, "Oh, I want a threesome, I want this," or when a man goes and sees a sex worker, well, what is it that he's really after in that, right?
What is it that he's really after?
In my
First
experience,
of all, thank you for
it's
sharing your
acceptance.
piece a minute ago and your
A gangbang
fantasy.
fantasy.
Um, it's the thing. It's just I want to say before I asked the question that I just asked because it was prompted or because it felt like in the
Yeah,
moment, but I would love to say
yeah,
beforehand that the expansion of this capacity to hold your partner, your lover, your whomever's inner life is,
hmm.
I think, highly, highly needed right now. Where
Oh
so
my
many
god, yeah.
people, given that the intimacy levels are down, that sexual levels are down, that fantasy is being implanted by the use of technology and such,
Mhm.
that just the ability to sit down and say, beautiful, that's
Mhm.
not for me. And I fucking love that you have that. Awesome. How do we play with this right now? Can I talk about it with you? We half act it out? That it
Mhm.
keeps us in a relational container rather than
Yeah.
what it feels like is perhaps the old model is you've now told me you want a gangbang. Oh my God, how could you? Who are you? Got to throw this out the
Mhm.
window. I can't believe you kissed my kids with that mouth. Holy shit.
Mhm.
As opposed to
Yep.
saying, well, wait a minute. Someone just shared a deep part of themselves. Whether you like it or not, that's the act that just happened. So
Yeah.
maybe we can take a
Yeah.
pause on what do men want from a sex worker and ask, how do we as a culture or collective, or how does the person listening to this conversation just take their capacity to hold their partner's past, their partner's desire, and their partner's fantasies with a bit more grace?
Yeah. Well, again, you really have to understand it, which is why, first and
Mhm,
foremost, you have to make the distinction between fantasy and desire, right?
mhm,
So, um, in a relationship, that has to be known, right? This is fantasy of mine. Not saying that I want to do this. I'm just sharing this. And then it really comes down to educating yourself, like on shadow work, on the origin of attachment, on the elements of sexology to be able to comprehend what this means,
mhm.
because it really is an invitation to the deeper parts of yourself, of your partner, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
reframing it under that lens is a
Mhm,
crazy magical invitation, right? It like
mhm,
creates so much depth in a relationship because what I see happen a lot is even with couples that start off really hot and heavy early on, there's lots of natural chemistry that could even last a good couple of years. At some point, that will atrophy because they've never actually gone into each other's darkness,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And that's why I think it's so imperative we bring that in to the relationship initially. We talk
Yeah.
about those things before it becomes personal, because the longer you wait in a relationship, the more it becomes like, well, I'm not enough then, right? Why are you just
Yeah.
telling me this now? I guess I never really knew you, right? You've been holding on to
Right.
this the whole
Right.
time.
Right.
And
Right.
because our sexual fantasies represent a void or a deficit or something we weren't getting, it's extremely informative, and it really equips our partner to, kind of, I joke with, some of my clients, like creating a dossier of like, here's a guide, here's a path to my
Mm-hmm.
soul, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and working with that
100%.
tool is incredible. It's super
Yeah.
incredible. It's like, it's mind boggling to me that, sexology is not required in grad school to become a psychotherapist. So
Mm.
I believe it's less than 14% of therapists in North America have any sort of sexuality training whatsoever. It's an elective. Okay.
Yeah.
And if we look at all these people that are working with couples and
Mm-hmm.
shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
And intimacy, I'm like, how the hell is this going on? And I've seen relationships just ruined over therapists' own biases because they don't know
For
any
sure.
of this stuff.
For
And
sure.
like, and I think about
Terrible.
even just like the non-consensual, the rape, the abuse, the assault,
Mm.
because no one explained this to our children, to their sons,
Mm.
it's just like, there was this case in Canada with the junior hockey team. And I started off my gangbang essay writing about this because I read about it. I'm Canadian. And there was like this 21-year-old woman, and hockey player the same age. They were hooking up under the influence of alcohol, and he texted four other of his teammates and was like, "Come in and get in on this, okay?"
Mm.
And because women have an adaptive strategy under threats, right? Hence the performance, right?
Sure. Sure.
Um, and it caught her off guard. So she took on as she called it, this porn star persona when she was being
Mm.
assaulted. Now, one might argue that the real person at fault here was the man that obviously invited the others in. That the others, when they got in the room, might have assumed, because she'd adapted that persona, that she actually wanted that. Because men and women communicate very differently, right? Men take things at face value, which is why the nonverbal consent is harder to read. Women are very locked into their intuition. That's how we're evolutionarily wired. So like, by avoiding these conversations entirely, which is what we do in the education system with kids, this is why we're absolutely fucked, right?
Mm.
And then this is where we grow up to be adults that carry so much internalized shame, and then also shame for our partners when we find out anything unconventional. Again, not understanding the underlying meaning of what that could be.
Yeah. I have two people in my life right now, Coral, who in the past week fired therapists because they brought kink to the therapist, and the therapist's own biases, whatever the word is, couldn't be with that. And that was the immediate,
Two?
like, oh, this is the problem. Two people in the same week. So it's such a big
Wow.
piece. And I will say, I love that you said it's like a guidebook to the soul. That I've said
Mm,
forever, that the exploration in relationship of the dark erotic is actual freedom. Like, you will not touch
mm,
a level of freedom that, once you've gone there with someone who will hold you in it, be with you in it, engage with you in it, meet you in it, that's freedom. And
yeah.
until you can get down there, you still have this tiny little piece of yourself that is yet explored. And even if it's explored solo, which it often is through fantasy or through writing or however, and it's
Mm.
not quite as relationally experienced, it's not fully expressed. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And I'm curious what you make of this, but what I've been finding with some men is, I was talking to a guy friend about this the other day, because obviously the men that come to me, they're pretty aware of what their fantasies are, and
Mhm.
there usually is a lot of shame around that. But I was talking to a male friend, and I see this with a lot of men in my life, that the numbing out epidemic, right? They're like,
Mm.
I don't have fantasies. What? Right?
Mm.
And it directly correlates. I literally see the direct correlation between that and like their complete detachment, like, and
Mm.
inability to hold a relationship, right? And
For
these are
sure.
like good men, but like
Sure.
they might have a girlfriend for a year, maybe 2 years, but they can never go deeper past that. And it's
Mm.
like, then they get written off as avoidant, even if they're not cheating, they're not stepping out. Again, they're good men, but they just can't go further. Like
Yeah.
they just cap out depth wise. So that's what I'm super interested in too. Like, okay, like, well, where is that part of you hiding? Like, how
Yeah.
deeply suppressed is it, right? That you can't even
Yeah.
think what a fantasy would be. Like, where did
Mm.
that go?
Mm-hmm. And the energy that when I hear this is it's not life-giving. So you can get in relationship, but to sustain relationship, to nurture relationship, to nourish relationship, you have to be tapped into Eros. You have to be
Yeah,
tapped into a different energy than like, cool, we get along well and we like the
yeah,
same TV show and Thursday nights we play cards and
yeah,
we have there's no juice in it. There's no fucking
totally,
soul in it. So
totally.
yeah, I don't
It's
think you can
life
disconnect from that.
force, right?
Yes,
It's like it's life force. It's our creative energy. It's like
for sure.
it's our aliveness.
It's
It's vitality.
aliveness.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, I talk about this a lot because I work with men that will, you know, they're at the top of their game. They're crushing work. They're good looking guys. They're making good money. And then they're finally like, yeah, okay, I'm ready for the relationship now. And they'll
Mm,
start dating the young, hot, woman. And this ranges from literally my clients to exes to guy friends of mine. Like clockwork, within a few months, I get a call or message or whatever being like, girl, I don't feel anything. I don't know what to do. I'm bored, like my dick isn't working. And
mhm,
I'm like,
mhm,
okay, well, what do you guys talk about?
mhm,
Well, I don't know. She just said like hangs out with her friends. I hang out with well, what does she do? Well, I don't want her to have to do anything. Like,
mhm, mhm,
okay, well, what does she like? What does she enjoy? What
mhm.
is she excited about? I don't really know. Okay, so she's lacking any passion
Yeah.
whatsoever. Right? Right? And like
It
there's
sounds
this
like
like
she's an
misconception
episode or
that
a copy of Reader's Digest or something, It's not like that's where she's
yeah,
at or he's at.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But we hear all this bullshit about like, sexual marketplace value, blah, 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 which is
Sure, sure, sure.
completely hysterical. I'll also say this. This is how I love just detonating that theory because the sex workers that I know in their mid to late 30s do better than any of them in their 20s that are like the top
Mhm.
Insta models that are pretending to be models or whatever. Like the ones in their
Sure.
30s are not only the smart, but they are making way more money, and they're super in demand. They have way better clients. So it's like
Mhm.
that is such a fucking myth. And I'll just
Mm.
ascribe this back to my personal experience too. Like, um, I am way better and like have way more quality relationships and attract like higher quality people in my life across the board than I did in my 20s. So this whole
For
sexual
sure.
marketplace value thing is just fucking such bullshit. But
Yeah,
I see
it's
this time and time
nonsense.
again. And it's like, so you're going for a woman that like, if you don't have a woman that is passionate and you're not even inviting her in to explore that, then it'll completely atrophy, right? There'll be nothing
Yeah.
there. It'll be fucking dead. And yeah, your dick will stop working. And then everything else will be affected. You won't be excited about anything in life,
Mhm.
and that's where you then
Mhm.
numb out. So it's like,
Yeah.
again, realizing that our access to Eros, like you said, is the gateway, the tool to abundance in everything in life. I entered the field of sexology because first of all, when I was doxxed, I wanted to understand myself and like,
Mm.
why was I okay with this? Why did I get into this? And what started as like, you know, um, psychological awakening, if you will, became a spiritual one. It became then sexual to spiritual, right? They're all interconnected. And
Mhm.
there was a few years ago where you would have said some of this stuff to me. I would have been like, shut the fuck up, rolling my eyes, like tantra, you
Mhm.
gross. Again, that was my inability to tolerate intimacy, right? Directly
Mhm.
showing up in my
Mhm.
life.
Yeah, these guys will quickly run out of friction. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the better ways to say it is unless you can get beyond friction, you're gonna run out, brothers. It's
Yeah.
There has to be some depth and substance and like core material to the relationship, even to the sex. If you're
Yeah.
having sex with someone
Yeah.
consistently and you're not in relationship with them in the classical sense, there still has to be some material that's passed between the two of you, or that holds the two of you together energetically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And friction, is so correlated directly with that insatiable curiosity, right? And that
Mhm.
can't be, you can't really hack that. You have to have that. And if you
Mhm.
don't have that, then good luck with your relationship. I just don't understand. Like, you have to be constantly curious. Like, that's an innate
Mhm.
quality. Clearly, you carry, I carry a lot of people that we both have in common. That's a
Yeah.
fundamental, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I believe it does start with self. Like we were talking about
Mm.
before we started recording, I'm client number one always, always. Like I'm about
Yeah.
to fuck off the grid as I do every summer to Europe for 6 weeks. I'm doing ISTA level 2. And I'm in this embodied psychosexual program with Dr. Saida Desolé. I've been in that for 3 years. And it's so important. And I have my business coach being like, Coral, you've got so many, like, don't you need to develop an evergreen course right now? And I'm like, no, I'm like, who would I be without continuing to expand on the absolute thing that brought me here in the first place, which is like
Mhm.
connecting to myself so I can connect with others. Like
Mhm.
I need that. That will never stop. I will never be done, period. And I don't
Mhm.
want to be, you know? And that's the way we
Right.
need to start looking at relationships. And the most fun way to do that, like, is through sex, right? Like, sure,
Yeah.
you can take improv classes together. I've done that as well. It's super fun, by the way. Like, and you can go on hikes and explore all these other things, right?
Sure.
Improv classes
Sure.
actually are great, like really great.
They're the best, by
But
the way.
like,
Yes, and.
oh, they're so fun. Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, a riff on the bit. Like, I love all of it. Um, but like, no, seriously, directly correlated. I've like prescribed improv to people before.
Yeah.
But like, what a better way to do this than through exploring like our sexuality, right?
Mm.
And it's uncomfortable too. Like, don't expect it's going to be a walk in the park.
Mm.
Expansion happens when there's friction. When it's like,
Mm.
it's not going to be 100% sexy on the mark all the time. Like, you're going to get it wrong, but that's how you expand and level up. And like, think the core thing that I find in like our shared spaces is just a general fearlessness, a fearlessness
Mm.
of like, I'd say that's probably my favorite quality about myself. I'm like, I'm not afraid to be judged, I guess, or like look messy or look dumb or get it wrong. Like I even do that with clients. Like I want to know real time when I'm, getting it wrong, or I want them to push
Mm.
back, or if they don't feel seen or something. It's like I want to be able for them to bring everything, to the relationship. And that's how I definitely want to show up in a partnership.
Mhm.
I definitely want to reward my partner for bringing their truth to me, no
Mhm.
matter what. Even if
Mhm.
it doesn't play out the way that we anticipated, like you said, it's like, okay, yeah, gangbang, not my thing. And by the way, I actually
Yeah.
wouldn't want to do that with a boyfriend. Like
Yeah.
upon further investigation, as I wrote, upon further investigation, as I wrote about in the essay, it's like, oh, maybe it's just that I'm lacking like actual masculine containment, because most men that I meet that I've gone on dates with, I psychologically dominate them. So it's like,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
actually looking
Mhm.
like it just takes one, right? It really actually just
Mhm.
takes one. But the physical manifestation of that in my fantasy was like, oh, it's only possible if I have multiple, because one man has never been enough.
Mm.
One man has been
Mhm.
too scared to contain me. I'm too much,
Mhm.
the chronic women are too much, men are not enough narrative. Like I've
Mhm.
gotten a lot of that in the past.
Mhm. Coral, if we could wave the magic wand around sexuality and having people explore, investigate, be curious about, would it be attunement? Would it be play? Where would you, like, if we gave you the prescriptive dose for society right now?
Mm. It's just going to be a little more, uh, it's a both end. So I would say
Okay.
it's the literacy of understanding, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
the kinks, fetishes, fantasy and desire. It starts with that language, because without that language, you are unable to make sense of any of it, right? What am I feeling? What am I
Right.
thinking? How did I reconcile these things? And then
Mm,
attunement. And attunement is, it's not something you can fast track, right? It's like the
mhm,
slowest
mhm,
thing. It's like, um, go as fast as the slowest part of you, as my mentor,
mm,
Dr. Saida Desolé says. And I always come back to that.
mm,
So whenever you feel the impulse to rush, which also shows up sexually, relationally, right? Like, what's next? Where are we going? Blah,
mm,
blah, blah. Slow
mhm,
down, get curious about that space in between. Um, and, you know, come back to the word sonder, right?
mm,
Like, everyone has their own complex, diverse, unique, nuanced internal experience and world. We are not alone in this. As soon as we think we're alone in our experience, alone in our pain, which I hear a lot of, right? Like, no one's gone through or thinks the way that I do. That's where we
mm,
screw ourselves. Everyone else is having
mhm.
that same internal experience, right? And
Yeah.
if and the way to attune is to really lead with authenticity, and you can't hack your way into authenticity. Authenticity requires bringing to light the uncomfortable parts about yourself, which doesn't mean you're trauma dumping, doesn't mean you're oversharing. It means you're saying the thing or sharing that thing or holding that stillness when it's really, really uncomfortable to do so, because you
Mm,
know that there's no other way to be.
mhm. Beautiful. Let's leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank
Coral,
you.
where can people besides your Substack find more of you, get in touch with you, work with you, or is there anything that you have coming up that you'd love to share with my audience?
Yeah, you can find me at coralosborne.com or on Instagram at the Unreal Coral Osborne. And my next season 2 of my podcast, The Next Man Up, is airing next month, so in May. And that's really what I'm excited about, even though it's total labor of love, as I'm sure you know these things are. Um, but it's about exploring the misconceptions and paradoxes of modern masculinity. So I
Mm,
speak to all different types of men, and I'm really focused in dialogue as it's alive and over an interview format. I'm
mhm,
less interested in the hero's journey of it. Now look at me, but like, what are we still working on? So the more I can explore complexity to help men better understand themselves and women better understand men, I think is what the new frontier is. And
mm,
that's the next paradigm shift of what I'm working on too. Is like, there's, historically we've seen women hold space for women, men hold space for men. And I really think we need each other. If
mhm,
we're
mhm,
doing the relational work, it's really important that men develop their relational skills and practice with other women. And it's also important that men hold other men. Like, I
mhm,
refer my male clients, a lot of them that are more on the reserved, timid side and have not embraced their dark masculine, like I'll refer them to men's work and
mhm.
retreats, because that's not something that is for me to hold, right?
For
That they
sure.
need the accountability and expression with other men. So yeah, it's my goal over the next year to create a space where we can hold each other in both of that, where more women, where I can hold more men, and men can also start doing this intimate work with women.
Beautiful. Thank you for joining me tonight. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.